Nubini Pizzanini. Nubini Pizzanini. Nubini Pizzanini. Pipi Kiwi. Nubini Pizzanini. Nubini Pizzanini. Nubini Pizzanini. Nubini Pizzanini. Nubini Pizzanini. Tim Cheese.
The Season 3 finale just came out and it literally destroyed everyone. The networks are already going wild, or at least what's left of him. The series then has its dose of sadness. All our favorite characters are dead, but the baby survives, and that's perhaps the only hope we can find in this finale.
Hello guys, and welcome back. After watching the season finale, I posted a video explaining why I thought Season 3 was a disappointment. Now that I've had more time to collect my thoughts, I'm making this video to clearly explain why I didn't like it, and to respond to one of the most common questions I keep seeing in the comments. More importantly, I want to address a major misunderstanding. Whenever people say they didn't like the show, it seems like the conversation always centers around the final episode, as if that's the only issue. But let me be clear, the problem is not the ending itself. People aren't disappointed because of how it ended. And no, people aren't mad because Gi-hun died. In fact, many of us expected that. From the very first episode of Season 2, when Gi-hun played Russian roulette with the recruiter, it was obvious. He didn't care whether he lived or died. That set the tone for his arc. So no, the frustration isn't about that either. The real disappointment comes from how many narrative threads were left hanging or rushed through. It felt like the story was sprinting to the finish line, and the director chose the easiest ways to tie things up. Sure, the events were plausible, but they also felt lazy. And to be clear, I'm not criticizing the message of the show. I'm talking about the execution. There were important storylines that were rushed, like Daeho's backstory or Myung-gi's sudden 180-degree character shift. Meanwhile, we spent too much time on things that didn't matter, like Junho finding the island. Based on how this season concluded, we honestly have 2 episodes worth of nothingness. If they had taken half of Junho's screen time and used it to flesh out character backstories, the ending would have hit much harder, and the deaths would have carried more emotional weight. Another big issue was the hype. The show made a lot of promises it simply didn't deliver on. I wasn't expecting them to top Season 1. Let's be real, that's nearly impossible for any show, but if you're going to hype something up, at least deliver on some of it. There were interviews with the director and cast that ended up being completely fake. For example, Hwang said he wouldn't repeat motifs from Season 1, and then he went ahead and reused the same emotional setup with Geum-ja's death. He also claimed this would be the darkest season ever. Well, maybe we have different definitions of dark, because nothing in this season shocked me in that way. Which brings me to what I see as the weakest part of the entire season, the pregnancy and the newborn baby. This is a narrative device I absolutely hate in TV shows, because let's face it, no one's going to kill the baby. No matter what the show is about or who produces it, no one wants to touch that line. So the moment the baby was declared a player, all the attention shifted to it. And suddenly, the ending became painfully predictable. It killed all the suspense. I don't mean this in a cruel way, but I genuinely disliked the baby. Not because of what it was, but because of what it represented. It became the center of the story, disrupting nearly every other plotline. And Gi-hun sacrificing himself for the baby, that felt like such a narrative cop-out. Compare that to an ending that would have forced us to really question his morals, his choices, and everything he had become. Instead, we got a safe, sanitized conclusion to a story that once prided itself on being unpredictable. While I understand the reasoning behind the ending, to show how corrupt people can be, that they'd rather sacrifice a newborn baby just to walk away with the money, it doesn't change the fact that it was the easiest way to conclude the story. Nobody wanted a happy ending. People wanted a good ending, one that gave real closure to the show they loved, not something that felt like it was torn apart for profit. And to those who said I was too harsh because they enjoyed the first 3 episodes, do you know why you enjoyed them? It's because they featured characters you already knew and had built an emotional connection with. The hide and seek game was amazing. The music, the cinematography, the pacing, it was all perfectly done, especially those scenes with people running through the maze. It felt like we were inside the game. We were holding our breath, hoping our favorite characters would survive. But then, killing off all the main characters, that early broke that emotional attachment. And I could have understood if they were killed to make room for another compelling narrative, like focusing on the long-awaited reunion between Junho and Inho. But that's not what happened. They were killed just so the story could focus on a group of random players, and a baby we all knew was going to survive. That's the issue with all these unknown characters in the final games. We didn't care about them. Their deaths meant nothing. We knew from the start they were just there to die. It all built toward one obvious confrontation: Myung-gi versus Gi-hun, a face-off that, let's be honest, mirrored the Season 1 finale. Again, nothing new here, despite being told that we wouldn't be able to predict the ending. And for the people who say they liked that part because it felt real, because in real life, bad people win and good people get taken advantage of, I find that kind of ironic. The same people saying this part is realistic were the first to defend all the other unrealistic elements by saying, well, it's just a TV show. Of course that's going to happen. If you're going to use realism as your standard, at least be consistent about it. You can't pick and choose when to care about realism just to justify what you like. You want the harsh truth? If this show truly wanted to imitate real life, that baby would not have survived 2 days in those conditions. Junhee gave birth prematurely inside a dusty, bloody death arena. She hadn't showered in 4 days. She was malnourished, and yet somehow she delivered a perfectly healthy baby in under 10 minutes. That baby was fed only twice, never changed, tossed around like a rag doll, and still somehow looked fine. Now imagine a real twist. Let's say most of the main characters survived. After the 5th game, the baby gets taken. The frontman announces that the winner of the games can choose the prize money or the baby. Suddenly the stakes are sky high again. Imagine Gi-hun, Junhee, and Myung-gi as the final 3. Gi-hun sacrifices himself so the mother and father can be together with their child. But then, Myung-gi turns and says he wants the money. Now they have to play one final game to decide who wins. That would have been powerful. That would have kept us guessing, and with emotionally important characters in the final game, it would have felt meaningful, not empty. Instead, we got a finale filled with strangers, leading up to a predictable conclusion. I found myself just waiting to get through it, just to see how the final showdown would play out. And even that, in the end, felt like something we'd seen before. Now regarding Myung-gi's character, let me be clear. I'm not disappointed that he turned out to be evil. The signs were always there. He constantly put the money above Junhee. That part was believable. What I am disappointed in is how fast that 180-degree turn happened. In the last 2 episodes, his character felt completely inconsistent. He was all over the place. In the beginning, he was like a tactical genius, like Sherlock Holmes orchestrating the game. But after the first round, he started making the dumbest possible decisions. Why would you reveal you're the baby's father so early? Why not wait until the final round when it could have actually meant something? And pushing player 100 without thinking that player 039 might kill himself? That was just reckless. He could have simply told player 100 to keep 039 alive and drag him onto the platform. Player 100 would have followed that order without question. Or take the second round. Why not just explain to the others why he pushed player 336 off the platform? Something simple like, we were low on time, we needed to move. This way, players 456 and 222 survive for now, and we can eliminate them later for a bigger prize pool. That would have convinced them, no doubt. We even saw them beat down 039, so they clearly already had a scapegoat. But instead, Myungi picks a fight with everyone in that next round for no reason. This is what I mean when I say the season felt rushed. It felt like lazy writing. These setups were clearly made just to force a Gi-hun versus Myungi finale. Same thing with the button mechanic. It only exists so Gi-hun can heroically sacrifice himself. It wasn't an organic part of the game design, it was a plot device. Another player who got a lot of screen time but ended up flopping in the end is Min-Soo. They basically turned one of the finalists into a drug addict suffering from withdrawal. And while I understand that taking Thanos' drug was probably the only way for a cowardly character like Min-Soo to actually kill someone, his arc felt poorly handled with tons of missed opportunities. Throughout Season 2, he was constantly bullied by Namgyu, and when he finally had a chance to get back at him, he didn't even try. It almost seemed like he felt bad for Namgyu instead of harboring any real resentment. And seriously, what was the point of dragging him all the way to the finale just to have him sit there as the first sacrifice? With the amount of screen time he got, we expected he'd at least survive the first round. But nope. Another potentially interesting storyline thrown away in favor of random players who barely mattered. And that right there is one of the main reasons so many people were disappointed with Season 3. The constant lack of closure, wasted character arcs, and Hwang always taking the easy way out. But honestly, none of those issues I mentioned made people as upset as this one. Junho's entire arc was completely irrelevant. You could remove him entirely from the story, and nothing would change. The Coast Guard shows up, the island explodes, but so what? There's no confirmation that the games were actually stopped. In my opinion, they weren't. They'll just relocate, buy another island, rebuild, and go again. No VIP were arrested, no frontman was exposed, nothing was dismantled. The only thing Junho did that actually mattered was saving player 246. That's it. And that one contribution didn't justify the amount of screen time he got. 13 episodes. And it all led to him being left on red. After that, he just gave up. And let's talk about how ironic it is that Inho left the baby and the money with Junho. This is the same Junho who was morally outraged when Inho accepted a bribe. And now, he's been handed a baby and 45.6 billion won. What's he going to do? Walk into a police station and say, hey, this baby and this bag of cash are evidence. The whole arc feels like it goes nowhere. We watched all those scenes for nothing. And here's the thing, if even half of Junho's screen time had been used to develop other characters or storylines, the entire season would have been stronger. Take Daiho, for example. Huge missed opportunity. He had one of the most promising setups, and they did nothing with it. It's honestly one of the biggest wastes of potential I've seen. Thanks to Reddit user Oscar8857.
Mic on.
Hello there, Mrs. Nobody Fresh.
Mic off.
Daiho didn't say he wasn't in the military. He said he was a social service personnel. I've never even properly shot a gun. In South Korea, that's an alternative form of military service for those physically or mentally unfit for active duty. Instead of full service, they're sent for 3 to 4 weeks of basic training, then assigned to civilian duties, subway stations, court offices, disability centers. Oscar explains this in detail, and I encourage everyone to read his post. I'll link it in the video description. That small clarification adds so much to Daiho's character, but it still doesn't change the fact that his arc was cut short, wrapped up too fast. In the end, he was reduced to nothing more than a mirror for Gi-hun's moral collapse. There was so much that could have been explored with Daiho: his childhood, parental abuse, the pressures on men in Korean society to conform to a certain idea of masculinity. Hwang could have used Daiho to tell a deeper, more meaningful story, but instead, we got surface-level development and a character wasted. And what can we even say about Gi-hun at this point? He was willing to kill Daiho, someone who, deep down, he knew did nothing wrong. Daiho didn't betray anyone. He wasn't responsible for the rebellion's failure. Meanwhile, the other players, the ones Gi-hun chose to forgive, were actively planning to sacrifice him in the next round. They directly killed others during the special game, without hesitation. But somehow, Gi-hun was fine letting them live. It also makes no sense of how Daeho character changed so much in the first 2 episodes. His behavior early on completely contradicts his established character, and I think that's because of Young-sik. He manipulated the narrative. He blamed Daiho for everything, and in Gi-hun's fragile mental state, he clung to that as a way to cope. He needed someone to blame, and Daeho became the scapegoat. And the tragedy is, if Hyunju had just said it wasn't Daeho's fault, or if Daeho himself had taken a moment to talk things through with Gi-hun, it all could have been avoided. But instead, Daeho chose paranoia, and he even lashed out at Gi-hun before the 4th game. Season 3 did Daeho so dirty. No closure, no redemption, just a wasted character arc that could have added so much more emotional depth to the story. And speaking of wasted arcs, can we please talk about the frontman reveal? How could people not be disappointed by the way Inho's reveal was handled? The setup was so good. Gi-hun's line, "Did we even have a future to begin with?" was powerful. So was the haunting question. You want to see those money-crazed men kill the baby with your own eyes. And what do we get in response? Sorry about Jungbae. That's it. That's the payoff. But beyond the letdown of the dialogue, Gi-hun's actions here are just baffling. He killed Daeho over a mistaken belief that Daeho ruined everything. But when face to face with Inho, the man who orchestrated everything, Gi-hun does nothing. I understand that Gi-hun knew what Inho said was true. Even if Inho died, the games would continue. But then why return to the dorm and not
Mateo! 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 Peppi troppi. Matteo. Giraffa celeste. Berber patapim. Boneca ambalabu. Gangster Futera. Gangster Futera. Pipi kiwi. Tung 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 sahur. Talpa di ferro. Bombomini gussini. Talpa di ferro. Boneca ambalabu. Boneca ambalabu. Boneca ambalabu. Cappuccino assassino. Neteo. Orangutini ananasini. Glorbo fruttodrillo.
Mic on.
I'm playing it on PC.
Mic off.
Chimpanzini bananini. Trulimero Trulicina. Tim Cheese. Cappuccino assassino. Glorbo fruttodrillo. Neteo. Boneca Ambalabu. Tim Cheese. Ta sahu. Cappuccino assassino. Talpa di ferro. Liri li la rilà. Talpa di ferro. Tim Cheese. Cappuccino assassino. Svinina bombardino. Svinina bombardino. Neteo. Chef Abracadabra. Boneca Ambalabu. Boneca Ambalabu. Boneca Ambalabu. Bur patapim. Boneca Ambalabu.
Mic on.
Bro, you bought everything.
Oh my god.
Kind of wasted your money on those bonecos.
Yeah, but okay, I died. I finally died in that night.
Get your goofy, pasty looking, no good. Hey, you want me to buy that crab for you?
I'm good. I'm about to hop off now.
You're gonna hop off?
Yeah.
Alright.
Bye.
Get some sleep, boy.
Good night.
Good night. See ya.